Welcome everyone to episode 4 of the Corner Post. Sorry about last week, didn't get a chance to do the podcast, had a fair few uni assignments and had our grand final on the Saturday, so wasn't able to sit down and podcast, but I think I did a post regarding the last week's results and covered it over the blog, but yeah, just wasn't able to sit down and talk, so sorry about that. But we are back for this week. We have an international break coming up, so a bit of free time to talk about what's been going on in the Premier League, but more importantly, deadline day for the Premier League. A lot of transfers, a lot of activity. Unfortunately, not much for Arsenal, but we'll get to them. So this will be a deadline day special. So I'll be going through each team and the ins and outs of each side, and just covering who's going to have the most impact, who's already playing for them, for the teams, and how each new signing is probably going to progress with them. So just some housekeeping as always. Just follow us on Facebook, 2Ball Blog. Tweet me, Sebastian_Quinn, if you have any questions at all. And yeah, we'll just jump straight into it. So just in alphabetical order, I think just make it nice and easy. Starting with Arsenal, unfortunately, with some bad news. Only one player in, Petr Cech, £10 million from Chelsea, and 18 players out. And reading the other day, I'm sure everyone's heard by now, that Arsenal were the only team in the top 5 leagues in Europe not to sign an outfield player. And I think, quite frankly, that's just it's ridiculous. That sort of thing can't be happening for a quote unquote big team like Arsenal. So a striker was really needed. Another defensive midfielder was really needed, as I've been saying already. News has been coming in that Danny Welbeck's going to be out until at least Christmas, so that's another knock on the striker. I think so. That looks like Walcott will be getting his chances up front with Giroud. Giroud should be starting, but I think Walcott will be getting his chances. Wenger's been copying a lot because he knew before deadline day that Welbeck was going to be having surgery and would be out for so long. So, really should have signed someone, surely. Not even one outfield player is ridiculous, I think. There's a quote from Wenger saying that, there weren't any quality players at a reasonable price. I think we all know Wenger's not about to sign anyone and overpay like United have done, which I'll talk about later on. So I think, surely could have brought someone in, even if he signed some unknown French boy, would have been better than no one. So in Petr Cech, out, Semi AI going to Cardiff, some other nobodies, Maitland-Niles going to Ipswich on loan. He featured in the game against Borussia Dortmund last season in the Champions League. Sonogo out to Ajax. He's the unknown French boy I was talking about that came in last season. Wojciech Szczesny going to Roma on loan. He's actually had a few good games for them from what I've seen. Isaac Hayden to Hull. John Miguel Toro to Birmingham on loan. Dan Crowley to Barnsley on loan. Chuba Akpom, I think he's got a good future with the Gunners. He's at Hull on loan. He's already scored, I think he's got 4 or 5 goals or professional goals with them already. So I'll look for him to come back and be a better player. Serge Gnabry to West Brom. This was a late deal. He played against Chelsea and actually played really well for them. So hopefully he'll get some game time there. Emiliano Martinez, our young goalie, just sent to Wolves on loan. Wellington Silva, who hasn't played for the club for quite some time actually, due to some visa restrictions. He's still at Bolton. And then we sent out loan, and then we sent Gideon Zelalem, definitely a big player for the future. I'm looking forward to watching him playing. Sent him to Rangers on loan. So 18 players out and 1 player in. I think it's really it's hard to watch as an Arsenal fan, I'll tell you that. So move on to Aston Villa. They've had 1 win from the past 4 games, just nothing too exciting. They beat Bournemouth in the opening match, but after that have suffered losses at home. So they brought in Scott Sinclair from Manchester City, Michael Richards from City again, Mark Munn, never heard of him, Idrissa Gueye, who's had a few good games for him, Jordan Amavi, Jordan Ayew, I think he should be playing pretty well for them, but he'll be scoring some goals hopefully for them if he can get on the score sheet. Rudy Gestede, Jordan Ventau, Jolien Lescott, from West Brom, and some other no-name guys, I must say. And then they've lost, of course, the big name Christian Benteke to Liverpool, but Andreas Weimann left to Derby, Darren Bent to Derby as well. Matthew Loughton, who's a pretty decent right back for them, went to Burnley for some reason. Shay Given over to Stoke. Fabian Delph, of course, to Manchester City. Ali Sissoko to Porto on loan. I'm not too sure why they didn't hold on to him, actually. Antonio Luna leaving to Elba. He had a decent season last year. And Nathan Baker, who finished the year pretty strong last year, sent to Bristol on loan. So Villa not having the best start to the season. Like I said, only one win from the first few games. But you look for them to improve. They're always a mid-table club. Hopefully they won't get relegated. So, they still have, Abgondahor and whatnot leading the line. So... moving on to the new boys, Bournemouth, who brought in Artur Boruc from Southampton. He left once Stecklenburg got signed on from the Serie A, so he's holding down the post. He's had some pretty good saves, I must say, but they signed the Australian Adam Federici as well from Reading, so hopefully he might get maybe a few cup games under his belt. I know he played last night for Australia against Bangladesh in a World Cup qualifier. I think he touched the ball 2 or 3 times, so it would have been a fun day for him. Christian Atsu from Chelsea on loan. I think that's a pretty big pickup for Bournemouth. Hopefully they give him some game time. Sylvain Distin, the Frenchman, the 36-year-old Frenchman who is still faster than most of the Premier League players. Tyrone Mings brought in from Ipswich, who's has a very promising start to the season. Max Gradel, I'm pretty sure he's the Dutch winger from St Etienne, so look for him to possibly feature. Glenn Murray, last day signing from Crystal Palace. And that's just about it. Leaving the club, Brett Pittman, Ryan Fraser, Josh McCoy, Jaden Stockley, and Stefan Zuba, and Harry Cornick. And I'll be honest with you guys, I have no idea who any of those players are. So we'll move right on to a bigger club, Chelsea. I think a few more household names coming through. So they brought in Nathan from Atletico Paranaense, Radamel Falcao from Monaco in loan after a terrible season last year with United. Asmi Begovic from Stoke after losing Czech, they needed a backup keeper, and after Courtois got sent off against Swansea, he's been featuring. Despite losing 3-0, had a really good game against Manchester City. So look for him. I mean, Courtois will take the starting spot right back, but he'll still feature in the FA Cups and the smaller cup ties. So Baba Rahman, a good young right back from FC Augsburg. I think he'll be part of the youth team and hopefully contribute, especially with Ivanovic not having the best of starts to the season. Of course, their big signing, Pedro from Barcelona coming in. And then Papi Djibouti, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, and Michael Hector, two young defenders coming in to help out. I think Papi might get some game time. I think John Terry, the controversy surrounding him, and whether Jose Mourinho wants to keep him around or what's going on. Of course, they were close to signing Stones. He handed in a transfer request apparently, and didn't want to be there anymore. But I think he handled that pretty professionally, and he's eventually staying. But Gary Cahill's nose injury as well doesn't exactly help. So. Looking at who they've lost, Peter Cech to Arsenal, of course, as I already spoke about. Christian Atsu to Bournemouth on loan. Marco Van Ginkel to Stoke on loan. I think he's got a good future ahead of him if he ever gets any game time. Thorgan Hazard, Hazard went out to Germany. Thomas Callas to Middlesbrough. Just looking through a bunch of no names. Mohamed Salah to Roma. I think they've got a very strong squad this year, Roma. Felipe Luis back to Atletico Madrid. So I think Chelsea lost about £4 million on him. So it was a year wasted of his life for Luis. Oriol Romeu to Southampton. He's been playing pretty well for them, I must say. Controlling the midfield quite nicely. Nathan Ake to Watford on loan. I think he's got a good future once Azpilicueta, if he does pull up injured or needs some time off from an international break, I think Ake can take over. Juan Cuadrado went over to Juventus, not even a year after signing him. He's been sent out on loan. I think they, probably should have kept him just for rotation's sake. Marco Marin, another young guy similar to Mark Van Ginkel, so not getting in game time at Chelsea, so sent out on loan. Looking around, not too many other players that I recognise at least. Lucas Piathon, he played a few good games from about 2-3 years ago, but he's been on loan since, so he got sent out to Reading. And Victor Moses to West Ham on loan, and then so he just signed a new 5-year contract with Chelsea though. And then Michael Hector, about just after being signed on by Chelsea, is sent out on loan to Reading. So yeah, a lot of players leaving Chelsea, as you can see, a lot of young players on loan. So at least Mourinho's trying to develop those guys. You know, he knows who he wants, knows who he doesn't. So looks like he's got things sorted despite the the slow start to the season. You know, 8 points adrift of league leading Manchester City, but you know, teams like Chelsea will definitely come back to make an impact. So moving on to Crystal Palace, bringing in Yohan Cabaye from PSG, which is a huge signing. He came back and played for Alan Pardew. That was his coach when they played for Newcastle. Patrick Bamford, he came in from Chelsea, another guy I don't recognise. Alex McCarthy, decent signing from QPR, and Connor Wickham from Sunderland. He was a pretty decent striker for them last year. He scored 2 years ago when they had the Great Escape. He was the one who scored the winners against Chelsea and Manchester City, so hopefully he can recapture that kind of form. Finally, Bakary Sako, who funnily enough scored the winner against Chelsea this year, so looks like they've got a good run of signings so far of beating the Blues. So Cabaye has been playing really well. Only thing is he's displaced Mile Jedinak from the starting squad, but I think Cabaye is definitely a step up in terms of offensive production. He does a lot more than Jedinak. Jedinak's good at closing down players, but Cabaye definitely does both. Surprised that he did sign with Palace, but I can imagine the look that he the relationship that he does have with Alan Pardew definitely had an effect on him. So it's, as I just said, Crystal Palace beating Chelsea this weekend, 2-1. So very big game for them. I think they're coming second at the moment. So their only loss coming to Arsenal. So it's kind of a somewhat of a consolation for Arsenal fans watching Chelsea lose. Looking at who they lost, Jack Hunt to Sheffield Wednesday, Carl De Silva. Going over some of these guys, really don't recognise many of them, so I won't bore you with them. We'll move right along to Everton, who's had a pretty half-decent start to the season. They brought in Tom Cleverley from Manchester United, the prominent central midfielder who's going to have a great season this year, as he did last year. They signed on Gerard Deulofeu, who signed last season on loan from Barcelona, and they signed him officially to a permanent deal this season. Leandro Rodriguez from River Plate, David Heinen from Olympiacos, and Aaron Lennon officially from Tottenham. He signed there for half a year on loan last season, and then now he's staying there officially now. So I think he's a decent winger for them. I think they still have McGeady. I'm not too sure, but he's had a few injuries, so I think they'll have to rotate the two of them. Aaron Lennon still has a crap load of pace, so you look for him to be running around. Running rings around the wingers and up and down the defense. So looking at who they lost, George Green, Sylvain Distin, of course, you know, getting old, moving over to Bournemouth, and Luke Garbutt, who had a few decent showing from what I saw. I saw him for a few games. He left for Fulham, so they've still got pretty solid defense. I think last year they were the only team to start, they started the same backline for every game of the year last year with Leighton Baines, Jagielka, Distin, and Seamus Coleman on the right back. So started all four players every single game. So fairly consistent. I think it was the year before. Sorry, would have been Stones instead of Distin. Very consistent. I think, you know, they do have a good defense. Of course, Stones was heavily linked with Chelsea after a £30 million pound move. Yeah, they brought in some guys on the cheap, especially Deulofeu, who's fairly young. He'll develop into a good squad player for them. And I mean, they haven't lost too many guys, so I think Everton can't really complain too much about this transfer window. Moving on to Leicester City, who's had a cracking start to the season. I mean, I did not see this coming at all. So they brought in Christian Fuchs from Schalke. That's Fuchs. I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly. Robert Huth, the German Terminator from Stoke City. Shinji Okazaki, who's been playing pretty well for them as a striker up front. I think he scored 2 goals so far. So so far so good for them, I suppose. Gökhan Inler from Napoli. He's a really good defensive midfield player, I must say. He will hold the fort down well for them. And Nathan Dyer from Swansea on loan, a good young guy. He's got a lot of pace to burn. So look for them to be playing a faster style of play alongside Riyad Mahrez, who had a great start to the season. So look at who they lost: Paul Gallagher, Adam Smith, and Thomas Hooper. Some of these names look like they were picked at random. Ben Hammer sent out to Bristol City on loan. He's one of the young goalkeepers. Esteban Cambiasso, the 35-year-old, out to Olympiacos. So he'll probably be calling it quits on his career soon. I would say definitely getting on in age. Matthew Upson, the former West Ham player, to MK Dons. Paul Konchesky, funnily enough, I thought he would have stayed on. Pretty good rotation player for them last season. He got sent to QPR on loan. David Nugent left after a good season last year. He's heading to Middlesbrough. Thomas Lawrence, their left mid, good young player actually, from the under-21s. He's heading to Blackburn on loan. And that's just about it. Liam Moore, one of their young centre-backs, he's not getting a game time at the moment, so he's at Bristol. And Callum Elder, their left-back, to Peterborough. So, still not too many significant players leaving at least, and they brought in some decent signings for the new team. Especially, I definitely rate Inler as a centre midfield player. So look for him to definitely make an impact for Leicester City, to their, especially with them starting the way they have. So they've strengthened the defence. Robert Huth and Fox pretty good in the middle, and Fox on the left-hand side. But I think Shinji Okazaki is definitely one of their biggest signings when it comes to scoring goals, which is something Leicester weren't too good at last season. Besides the 5-3 win over United early in the year, they didn't have too many high-scoring games. So I think, they have had a good start to the season. They won't hold it up. They'll finish mid-table roughly, if not a bit lower. But you hope to see them do well, especially after last year having to win so many games at the end of the year and get out of the relegation zone. Moving on to Liverpool, some huge signings for them, but by the look of it, nothing's going to pay off. So, James Milner, free transfer from Manchester City. Danny Ings from Burnley, the young English talent, who, I think he scored 14 goals for them last year. So, for Burnley last year. So hopefully he can turn that kind of form into goals for Liverpool. But moving on, Joe Gomez from Charlton. He's been really good for them, actually. Very pacey, and did well to contain Ramsey last week against Arsenal. Roberto Firmino, I didn't see this transfer coming from Hoffenheim. Nathaniel Klein, he's been very good for Liverpool after coming across from Southampton. Of course, because Liverpool buy half their players from there anyway. The big signing, the £32.5 million, Christian Benteke, is a crap load of money for, I think, only one goal so far. So, and that goal was offside as well. They should have called it. Some huge signings. I think Liverpool has been let off the hook a few in the early games. They had a few easy teams to start off with. They just faced Arsenal, but before that they had the 1-0 win against Stoke, and then I think they faced West Brom. So, and just to further prove my point, just this week they lost 3-0 at home to West Ham. And so that was the first time since 1963 that West Ham's beat Liverpool at Anfield. So, funnily enough, at that time, the Beatles were headlining the charts for music. So, definitely quite some time ago. Look at who they lost. Iago Aspas, the player they brought in after losing Fernando Torres to Celta Vigo. Glenn Johnson's headed to Stoke after a rather quiet year for Liverpool last year. Sebastian Coates to Sunderland. He wasn't breaking the starting lineup, especially with Dejan Lovren and Skrtel in the middle. Javier Manquillo sent out to Atletico Madrid, but the loan was cancelled apparently, so just reading a bit more into this. He's on a permanent deal now. So moving on, Luis Alberto sent out on loan. Raheem Sterling, of course, the big money move to Manchester City. Andre Wisdom to Norwich. He got some game time this weekend against Southampton after one of their right backs was sent off for putting one of the Southampton players in a headlock. So Wisdom's pretty much a bodybuilder in a footballer's body. So hopefully you'll see him not hurt too many people. Ricky Lambert, the prodigal son, returning and then quickly leaving to West Brom. He had played against Manchester City and then hasn't done too much since. After losing 3-0, they decided to play Sadio Mourinho. So moving on, Balotelli to AC Milan on loan. I think this is a really stupid deal because it's pretty much Liverpool paying £2 million for the season at AC without having AC Milan giving AC Milan the option to buy after. So interesting move for them. I think it's solely based on getting him back in form and getting some game time under his belt. So hopefully he'll come back a changed man. He scored a screamer just recently in a friendly, so hopefully he can turn that goal scoring form into goals for Liverpool. So moving on, Lazar Markovic brought in after Torres as well. He's sent to Fenerbahce on loan, and Fabio Marini to Sunderland. I think he wasn't getting any game time with Liverpool, so that's fair enough for them. But I think he could have been a good rotation player for them. You know, you do have Benteke up front, but he can't do everything for you. So Danny Ings, you know, depends on his form, can't do too much. But Mourinho has a knack for just scoring goals, and you know, Barini, sorry, had a knack of just scoring goals. So you know, after last season, had a good run of games with Sunderland. So hopefully, on a permanent deal, he'll be able to start scoring for them alongside Jermaine Defoe. So moving on to Manchester City, the big spenders. They brought in Enes Ünal to Bursaspor. He's a good young Turkish player, actually, so rate him quite highly. The big move, as just mentioned, Raheem Sterling, Fabian Delph from Aston Villa for only £8 million. That's a ridiculously good steal for them. Nicolas Otamendi, another huge defensive player for them from Valencia. Of course, the big signing on the deadline, Kevin De Bruyne from Wolfsburg. Otamendi, Sterling, and De Bruyne are going to be a force to be reckoned with this season. So I think City, you know, they're coming first. They haven't conceded a goal yet. So they're going to have a huge season this year. I think they should be favourites to win it, especially with the kind of form Chelsea and the other big teams, quote-unquote big teams, are in. You know, United's failing to score. Arsenal will need more strikers. Chelsea's losing games, which is just out of the ordinary altogether. So yeah, Man City so far so good for them. They've brought in more players to strengthen their squad. I really hope De Bruyne actually gets on the field. You'd hate to see a player like him get wasted on the sidelines, but I know Delph suffered an injury early this year while playing in Melbourne, actually. I got to watch that game. And Nicolas Otamendi, I think he had 28 blocks. He had the most blocks in the La Liga last season for a centre-back. So going over who they lost, James Milner over to Liverpool, of course, as just mentioned. Scott Sinclair leaving for Aston Villa. Dedrick Boyata, one of the decent strikers to Celtic, just of course, you know, behind so many players, he's never going to get in game time. Jordi Hewula, used him on FIFA, and that's all I know about him. Stefan Jovetic, of course, spent 2 seasons with the Citizens, and now he's off to Inter Milan. Pretty good striker. He's still fairly young. Sorry, I think he's about 26, 27, so still a good few years in front of him. Adding Dzeko to Roma on loan, like as I mentioned earlier, I think they've got a good squad building just there. And that's just about it for them. So, I mean, Manchester City didn't have to do too much with their off-season. They had a really good squad to start with. And, of course, because they have the money, they went out and bought even more players. So, you can't blame them for it. I mean, when they're playing as well as they are, why not bring in more players to do the job? You know, they could go on to win the treble this season. You know, if they win the Capital One Cup, the FA Cup, and the Premier League. So, you know, that is a possibility. But Kevin De Bruyne's a great player to bring in. Otamendi just strengthens the defence even more. And really, I mean, you can't complain if you are a City fan. Not that there's many out there, but if you are one of the, you know, 20 or so in Australia, then you should be pretty happy with this off-season. The biggest spenders of the off-season, Manchester United, 336 million. They brought in Memphis Depay, who's been great for them, I must say. Well, not great, actually. I think it's a bit too much. I think he's been pretty good. 2 goals against Club Brugge. He's been playing pretty well during the Premier League without doing too much. I think their best signing so far, I must say, though, is Matteo Darmian, who signed from Torino. He's been absolutely phenomenal at their left-back position, just really going up and down, getting crosses in. He's been shutting down opposition wingers, and I can't speak highly of him enough. So they brought in the midfield, Bastian Schweinsteiger from Bayern Munich, and Morgan Schneiderlin from Southampton. So the Schmidfield holding down the fort, really playing well. I think Bastian Schweinsteiger's, in his contract, it says that he's not allowed to play more than 50 minutes a game. Otherwise, he gets a pensioner's bonus. So Michael Carrick and him are sharing the load when it comes to playing that defensive midfield position. But Michael Carrick is incredibly frustrating still, because he doesn't move. When he gets the ball, he stops, he stands still, and he looks for a pass. And if he can't find a pass, he plays it back to the keeper. So really frustrating to watch. So I do like Schweinsteiger a lot better. He gets to move forward a lot more. Schneiderlin's been great as defensive cover, been shutting down players. Definitely what Southampton's missing at the moment. So moving on, Sergio Romero coming in from Sampdoria. Of course, there's a whole the controversy surrounding the paperwork regarding David De Gea, who almost left. So Real Madrid is saying that they didn't get the paperwork in time. Manchester United saying that they sent it, and it's all a lot of he said, she said. And so De Gea is still with United. Sergio Romero is going to be the backup keeper, and I think De Gea is on the verge of signing a new 5-year deal. So there you go. They also, on the deadline day, after they desperately needed a striker, brought in Anthony Martial from Monaco for a ridiculous sum of £36 million for a 19-year-old unproven French talent. So really incredibly overpaid for this player. I don't think he's definitely not worth that kind of money, but they are, of course, investing in the future of the team, but it just doesn't fit the transfer model that Van Gaal's been employing so far. It's just he's signed on these big players to win now, to do this and that, and to win the league, win the Champions League, win everything. And then they've brought in this 19-year-old raw talent. So by the look of it, they might be playing Mata out on the left and put Rooney in the number 10 position and just have Martial in front of him. But we'll have to see. I mean, if he starts off pretty well, then, I mean, the spending will be justified. But I highly doubt it, and it'll take a while for him to settle in. So looking who they lost, Tom Cleverley to Everton. Ben Amos, one of their goalkeepers, to Bolton. Nani joining Robin van Persie at Fenerbahce. I think they'll have they've got a decent team going over there. Angel Di Maria, of course, to PSG for a stupid amount of money. Tyler Blackett to Celtic on loan. He had a below par season last year. Johnny Evans sent over to West Brom on a permanent deal. Javier Hernandez, Chicharito to Bayern Leverkusen. Hopefully he'll get some game time with them. Adnan Januzaj to Borussia Dortmund. Didn't see this one coming at all. So he's there on loan. Apparently United were given the chance to buy Marco Reus for 60 million, which honestly they probably should have taken it. I think you're going to spend 36 million on some 19-year-old. You may as well buy Marco Reus, a proven goal scorer, German superstar, for double the price. And I mean, he's what, 25 now? He's still got plenty of years in him. So I'm not too sure why they didn't buy him, considering how much they spent on Martial. Anders Lingard sent out to West Brom. And Raphael over to Lyon. So that splits up the Twins again. So that's just about it for Manchester United. I think, they're still struggling to score goals. They want to play Fellaini as a striker now that Rooney's struggling a fair bit. So I think, they play him up front. He's a really good... that's where he thrived in Everton. So if they do play it, then it can work for them. But not too sure just in terms of the pace and how United play, whether it'll fit. I mean, if they keep up the crosses and keep playing out wide, then it'll fit perfectly. But if they want to play, tiki-taka through the middle, then you can forget about Fellaini doing too much. So moving on to Newcastle United, they brought in Jorginho Wijnaldum from PSV, Alexander Mitrovic, who just got red carded against Arsenal. He's the latest Premier League bad boy to come in. Chancel Mbemba from Anderlecht as well. And the one I'm most excited about, Florian Thauvin, who's been playing very well for Marseille. And when he did get on the field last week against Manchester United, the week before, he was doing really well. You can just tell he's got that flair about him, and he wants to move the ball, wants to go off and score goals. So some big signings for Newcastle. They actually spent the second most amount of money in the Premier League so far. Well, now that it's finished, that's settled already. I think that Newcastle playing very competitively. Colaccini's been playing very well, but they haven't been getting the results. Arsenal beat them 1-0 this week. Last week they lost to 0-0 draw with Manchester United. So you want to spend these monies, and hopefully Steve McLaren can get the best out of these players. So looking at who they lost, Remy Street to Port Vale. Semi Amiobi to Cardiff City. I thought they should have kept him as a decent striker. Remy Cabella sent back to Marseille on loan. I think he's a very good centre attacking midfield player. So kind of surprised why they got rid of him straight away. Davide Santon sent to Inter. He was a half decent left back for them. And that's just about it. Other than that, no real big names. So moving on to Norwich, which unfortunately I don't have too much information on. They brought in Graham Dorrans from West Brom. Yusuf Malubu from West Brom as well. He's a very good defensive midfield player. I do know him. Andre Wisdom, as we spoke about earlier. And Matt Jarvis from West Ham on loan. I was surprised West Ham sent him out on loan. He's still such an older player. I think he's 28 at the moment. I think he's a good player for them, but surprising. Hopefully he gets some game time with Norwich. So looking at who they lost, no one that catches the eye. So we will move. Ricky Van Wolfswinkel, who was there last time they played in the Premier League. I think 3-4 years ago. So he's to Real Betis on loan. So decent young striker. Had a good start when he first started with Norwich, but other than that, hasn't done too much for them. So moving over to Southampton, who lost a lot of players and brought in a fair few players as well. This season they brought in Drami from Malaga, Cedric Suarez from Sporting Lisbon, who's pretty good right back for them. Watch him play against Norwich. Martin Stecklenburg, who's still at Fulham for some reason, so he's loaned out to Southampton. Cuco Martina from FC20, or Jordi Claes from Feyenoord. Stephen Corker from QPR, pretty good centre back, I must say. Ariel Remu, as I spoke about, from Chelsea, and Virgil van Dijk from Celtic. From Celtic. So I think brought in two very good centre backs, I must say, but hopefully they'll be getting some game time. They do have Yoshida in front of them, so that'll be it'll at least the cup competitions will give them a chance to rotate. As I said, they did lose a lot of players. So Nathaniel Klein, as I said, to Liverpool, Artur Boruc to Bournemouth, Schneiderlin to Manchester United, Jack Stevens to Middlesbrough, and Emmanuel Mayuka, one of the quickest players in the Premier League, to Metz. So I'm surprised they didn't hold on to them, but Southampton is definitely in a rebuilding process, and hopefully out to have a good season. I mean, they didn't sign too many great players to replace Schneiderlin. They still have Wanyama in the middle, but looking at the players that they did bring in, it just really isn't enough for them. So I think they're going to have a bit of a letdown of a season this year. So moving on to the final few teams, we have Stoke City, who now has more Champions League winners than any other team in the Premier League. So they brought in Philip Wolfschied from Bayern Leverkusen, Jacob Halgod from FC Midtjylland, Joselu from Hervenova 96, Marco Van Gijk from Chelsea on loan, Shay Given for some reason from Aston Villa, Glenn Johnson from Liverpool, more importantly, Ibrahim Afellay from Barcelona, Xherdan Shaqiri from Inter Milan, and that's really it. Some other guys I don't recognise, but they lost Robert Huth to Leicester City and Steven Zozzi to Sevilla, and Asmir Begovic, of course, to Chelsea. So losing some not too many big names besides Begovic, but they brought in some really good players, I must say. They're playing pretty well. They did have a draw this week. I think it was with Tottenham. So after spending as much money as they have, you want to see them actually perform up to the standard that they've set. Having that many Champions League winners should give them the edge, but so far they haven't done too much. They did lose to Liverpool on the opening day, and it's not off to a great start for Stoke City. So moving on to Sunderland, the team that showed some great fight this weekend, actually. They brought in Sebastian Coates on a permanent deal from Liverpool, Adam Matthews from Celtic, Yunus Kabul is a pretty decent centre-back from Tottenham, Jermaine Lens, one of the Dutch wingers from Dynamo Kiev, Jan Mvia from Rubin Kazan. He's a good defensive mid, strongly linked to Arsenal for about 5 years, unfortunately. Fabio Borini from Liverpool. He, like I said earlier, good signing for them. And DeAndre Yedlin, the American left-back from Tottenham, I got to watch him play when Tottenham came out to Sydney and played the All-Stars. So, some good pace on him. He has a very good head on his shoulders, very calm under pressure. So, it'll be good to see him play, hopefully. But, unfortunately, Sunderland not playing the best style of football at the moment. So, looking at who they lost, El Hadjil Bar to Charlton, Santiago Virginia to Getafe on loan. Jordan Pickford to Preston on loan. Connor Wickham, as I spoke about earlier, to Crystal Palace. I think he's a big loss for them, actually. Well, relatively speaking, to their team. And Emmanuel Giaccherini to Bologna, who they signed a few seasons ago, who played pretty well for them and hasn't broken the first team now that they've cemented it. He was always on the outskirts and on the outside looking in, so a bit unfortunate for him. Moving on to the surprise package of the Premier League season so far, Swansea, who just beat Manchester United 2-1. So they brought in Andre Ayew, one of the goal scorers for them. He's already got 2-3 goals already. Frank Tabernu from Saint Etienne. Christopher Nordfeldt from Geneva, Ada from Sporting Braga, Oleg McBurney from Bradford, and Josh Vickers. I'm pretty sure he's one of our goalkeepers at Arsenal. So, not huge signings, but one of the big signings from last year was Bafetemi Gomis. They signed him fairly late on, and he's been absolutely phenomenal for them. So, he's just transformed the way they play, and with Andre Ayew up front, they've been killing it. So, looking at who they lost, Jazz Richards to Fulham, David Cornell to Oldham, Mondo Barrow to Blackburn on loan, Stephen Kingsley to Crewe on loan, and Nathan Dye to Leicester City on loan. So really, no huge losses. They've still got a very good side. And I've got to say, shout out to John Joe Shelby, who's been playing out of his mind so far. So look for him to really be pushing for a English spot. So excuse me. He'll be in for a great season. He's been playing very well, very composed on the ball, and he's been clinical for Swansea. He'll be crucial for them pushing forward for the rest of the season. So moving on to the scum, Tottenham Hotspur. They brought in Kevin Wimmer from Cologne, Kieran Trippier from Burnley, who had a very good season last year, Toby Alderweireld, who had a bit of controversy surrounding him because he was with Southampton and he was supposed to go directly back to Atletico, but ended up signing with Tottenham before the approval of Atletico went through. So a bit of a hit and a miss for the Belgian centre-back. Clinton Ng, never heard of him, and Sung Hyun Min from Bayer Leverkusen, the Japanese superstar, just bombing down the wings. He's very quick, very good for them. So he'll replace Aaron Lennon on the wing. Looking at who they lost, surprisingly, Paulinho, he's playing in China at the moment. I swear someone should have picked him up as a good centre mid player. So, yeah, surprised no one took him, as I said. Lewis Holtby came in after the whole that Gareth Bale left. He's over to Hamburg. Etienne Capoue to Watford. He's a good defensive player, actually, for the French team. Yunus Kabul to Sunderland. Benjamin Stambouli to PSG. He's a good young French player. All these French guys coming through. Vlad Churches to Napoli. Half-decent centre-back. Didn't have the best of seasons. And that's just about it. And rounding it out, DeAndre Yedlin, as I just said, to Sunderland on loan. And Aaron Lennon to Everton. So the Spurs pretty much keeping the same squad that they had. Nothing too serious. But a major cause of concern is the man, the myth, the legend, Harry Kane. I think he's got 3 goals in his past 12 Premier League games, so a little bit concerning for them. You know, he's supposed to be the hero to lift them out of Arsenal's shadow, but so far he hasn't done anything. So you'll hope for I mean, most Tottenham fans will want to see them push for the top 4. I don't think it'll happen. I see them finishing 7th or 8th, maybe in the Europa League spot, but They haven't improved all that much. The way they're playing is all like convincing, and it's yeah, not enjoyable to watch, to be honest. Not just because I'm an Arsenal fan, but just as a football supporter. So, moving on to the final three teams, Watford bringing in Sebastian Prödl from Werder Bremen, Etienne Capoue from Tottenham. Just going to quickly go through these. Nathan Ake from Chelsea on loan. Alessandro Diamanti from China. He's actually a pretty good player from what I've seen. And Victor Ababo, I was surprised by this, signing on a permanent deal from Roma. I think Ababo is best known for his FIFA, his overpowered FIFA stats rather than actually scoring goals in real life. So, hopefully, he'll get on the score sheet for Watford, who's they're not struggling to score goals, but they need a consistent goal scorer to put the ball away. So, hopefully they score. Sorry, just reading over it. The website I'm on has Juanfran playing for Watford, but I'm pretty sure he plays for Atletico. So maybe these guys need a sub-editor or something. I'll put my hand up. Going through who they lost, no big guys. Connor Smith, another generic English name. We'll just move right past them onto West Bromwich Albion. They brought in James McLean from Wigan, Ricky Lambert, the prodigal son from Liverpool, Serge Gnabry, Arsenal on loan. So he should be playing well for them. Definitely needs some game time. Solomon Rondon, I think Venezuelan striker, huge, not huge in terms of height, but in terms of just muscle mass. Very bulky striker that he should outmuscle defenders easily, and was the one that, despite losing 3-2 to Chelsea, he was the one that won the penalty. He was the one that got John Terry red carded. So you can imagine just how physical he is. They brought in Johnny Evans, the useless centre back with no H in his name, from Manchester United, and also Anders Lindegaard from United as well as a backup goalkeeper. They lost Graham Dorrans, as I said, to Norwich. Yusuf Lubu to Norwich as well. Jason Davidson, the Aussie left back, to Huddersfield. He had a half decent game last night against Bangladesh, but that being said, it's Bangladesh. And Jolyon Lescott to Aston Villa, was already mentioned. So rounding out the squad, rounding out the transfer deadline special, we have West Ham, who brought in Darren Randolph from Birmingham City, Pedro Aubameyang, Dimitri Payet, he's a huge signing for them from Marseille, been playing really well. Angelo Albana from Juventus, he's a pretty quick centre-back. I think he just wasn't getting game time, but you look at the Juventus defence, and it's for good reason. You got Bazzagli there, Giorgio Chiellini. There's no reason why he'd get any game time there. Carl Jenkinson on loan from Arsenal. Manuel Lanzini, Alex Zon from Barcelona on loan again. I think they just signed him permanently already. Victor Moses and Nikita Jelavic from Hull signing permanently with West Ham. Look for him to get his career back on track. Had a few good seasons with Hull City. So he'll be trying to score goals here, and played very well for Everton before he got outed with them. Looking at who they lost, Dan Potts to Luton, Paul McCullum, Stuart Downing to Middlesbrough, heading back to where it all started for him. And that's just about it. Matt Jarvis, as I mentioned earlier, heading to Norwich on loan. So that rounds out the deadline day special. Just looking at the games next week, we start off with Everton and Chelsea at Goodison Park. And then the late games, Arsenal versus Stoke, Crystal Palace and Manchester City, Norwich playing Bournemouth, Watford taking on Swansea, West Brom against Southampton. The game of the round, Manchester United versus Liverpool. So I predict this will be a 0-0 draw. Leicester versus Aston Villa, and then the early Tuesday morning game, West Ham versus Newcastle. So that's your week ahead. Thank you everyone for listening. Just some final housekeeping again. Just follow us on Facebook, 2Ball Blog. Tweet me, Sebastian_Quinn. I'm on SoundCloud now. I'll leave the link in the description. And thanks very much for listening. See you guys next week.